right, here we go. I wanted to bring up another topic for the gun world out there, and that is this idea of President Biden's executive order. It's finally been published to the Federal Register, and I've finally been able not just to have to believe what is being put out there by the talking heads in the media, but also, those that have an agenda to push. And if you've heard about this executive order, then what you've heard is that this executive order does some awesome things, right? But before I get into that and whether or not that is the case, I want to make sure that everybody understands what an executive order is. As you know, our country is broken up into co-equal branches of government. You've got the legislative, the judicial, and the executive. Okay. So at the head of the executive branch is the senior executive, the president of the United States. He is essentially the CEO of the federal government, minus the judiciary and the legislature or the Congress. So he is the one that runs and manages the DOD, DHS. I mean, you name it, all, DOE. Any of those departments created by Congress, that is what the executive does. That's what the president does. An executive order applies solely, ladies and gentlemen, to the executive branch. President Biden, whatever his name is, Biden, it's pretty much Obama's third term anyway, but President Biden can issue any executive order he wants, and it doesn't affect you or me. He can issue an executive order that you must eat broccoli with every meal. Doesn't make it so. That's not law. That's not, it's not a directive on the American people. An executive order is strictly an order to the executive branch departments. And generally, if it's an executive order, it will deal with certain branches of the government. Some executive orders may only deal with the DOD. Here's an order to the DOD. Here's an order to the Department of Education. You name it. That's what these executive orders do. So first and foremost, if you are a free man or woman out there, and that's all there are is men and women, an executive order doesn't apply to you. So now that we've got that out of the way, okay, every executive order ever passed by a Republican or a Democrat or a Whig or whatever, does not apply to you as a person. Now, with that said, let's get into what does this executive order actually say. Now, because you can see up here, this is certified by the GPO. So I can't highlight anything like I wanted to. I've read through this whole thing. I tried to highlight it. But it won't let me because, it's been signed and it's official. And I guess they just don't want people. And I'm sure I could do it. I could do it a different way, but I decided not to. But, here's the thing. President Biden talks about daily acts of gun violence, including community violence. By the way, community violence and suicide are the two most common types of so-called gun violence. By the way, gun violence is a myth. No such thing as gun violence. Guns don't commit violence. People commit violence with guns. And then, so, if they really wanted to solve the problem, they deal with this piece right here. Because this is where then look, for the purposes of argument, and so that I don't have to keep explaining this, I'm going to go with the word gun violence because that's what's used here in the executive order. And then if you also deal with suicide, you can get rid of about 60% of gun violence as well. So you get rid of suicide. If you manage that and you manage community violence, almost all of your so-called gun violence is going to go away. And then he says, so what's really important here, he goes through a bunch of nonsense, blah, blah, blah. We have to do this. I have a whole of government approach. He's going to hold gun traffickers and rogue gun dealers, blah, 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 blah. But you really get down to what does he really want here? Because, he signed this Safer Communities Act last year. And that act, as I said in a previous video, does absolutely nothing. It doesn't help. It doesn't solve any problems whatsoever. As a matter of fact, it didn't really even do much of anything. And really, if you really want to look, if you don't want to watch this whole video, essentially what this executive order boils down to is telling the executive branches to follow the law. That's pretty much all it does. And he calls it the most significant bipartisan gun legislation in 30 years. But here's what he's really trying to do. This is what he really wants to do. Ban assault weapons, ban high-capacity magazines, universal background checks, safe storage of firearms, required, by the way. So you in your own home, what he's trying to do is force you to put a gun in a safe, or whatever they're going to call it, safe storage. Funding his comprehensive Safer America plan, which I'm going to do a separate video on this Safer America plan because it doesn't do anything to make America safer. And then, of course, expanding community violence intervention and prevention strategies. In the meantime, he's so-called going to do everything he possibly can. 1 second, folks. Let me put this on mute. I'm going to let you read really quick just this first section. I've got a visitor that just walked in, and I'm going to let you read that. Thanks. All right, guys. My awesome sheriff came in here, and I love him, so I gotta talk to him. So here's what this does. I'm sorry to have that brief moment of silence there. Here is his first thing that he's going to do is implement, and this is this is what the executive order does. Implementation of the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act. Now, what that really means is we're going to follow the law that was passed and signed into law, the bill. This does nothing. Absolutely nothing. It's just telling, the Attorney General, the Secretary of Health and Human Services, Education, Homeland Security, provide me a report within 60 days on how you're following the law. That's what Section 2 is. Section 3, additional agency actions to reduce so-called gun violence. And this just tells him this is the only part of this that should be worrying to everybody is Section 3. Because here's what they want to do. Clarify this. He's telling this to the Attorney General. Clarify the definition of who is engaged in the business of dealing in firearms and required to become an FFL. Ladies and gentlemen, the reason that this is a problem, look at what his agencies have done with the definition of rifle. Now, apparently, if you've got a rifle that has a pistol brace on it, they've redefined what is considered a rifle. And, because what has he done? They've essentially clarified a definition that has already been defined by Congress. And so what they're going to do here is, and this is just me guessing. Okay. This is just me guessing. I bet you, here's what's going to happen. They're going to create a rule. The AG is going to, along with the ATF, create a rule that says, okay, if you sell more than one gun per year, you are engaged in the business of dealing in firearms, and therefore you've got to have an FFL. And if you don't, it's a felony. So they're going to essentially make anybody that is a hobbyist and wants to sell a firearm, if you've got a whole lot of guns, it is not unusual for you to buy a new one and you're like, okay, I don't have room for it. I need to sell one. Maybe. I don't do that. But this is where I think this is going. All right, mark my words here. That's where I think this is going. And this is in order to increase compliance with so this is how they're going to try and get around universal background checks. If you say that anybody who sells a firearm for a profit, they could even make a rule that says if you sell a gun for more than you bought it for, you are engaged in the business of dealing in firearms. Therefore, you're required to become an FFL. You're required to follow FFL rules, and you have to do a background check on anyone you sell a gun to. That's where I think this is going. And then he says specifically, by considering a rulemaking. And of course, he uses these words because he's got to, but really, they don't care about this. They don't care about appropriate or consistency with the law. So they want to prevent former FFLs whose license have been revoked or surrendered from continuing to engage in business. Okay, that's not happening. So again, this is a nothing burger. Then they want to publicly release information to the fullest extent possible of violations of law by FFLs. Let me tell you something, ladies and gentlemen. Do you know how many quote unquote violations of law FFLs commit every day that are just minor things? I mean, it's even filling out the 4473. If you do that incorrectly, it's a violation of law. There's a reason why, especially if you go to the big box stores and you buy a gun, that it's not just the 4473. There's all this other stuff. And then sometimes they got to go and get a manager to check over it to make sure it's all done. Because if they mess up one little thing on the 4473, that's quote a violation of the law. And let's say that they don't have a certain thickness of glass on their display case, or certain kinds, maybe not enough protection of their building. Maybe it's built with a material that is outdated or something. Those are all violations of law, according to FFLs, what the FFLs have to do. And now what Biden wants to do is release the names of anyone that's ever made a mistake as an FFL dealer, no matter how big, no matter how small. And then support efforts to modernize and make permanent the UFA. The UFA is stupid. This is it's a law that's already there. Here's the law right here. It's a law that's already there. This does absolutely nothing. Essentially, it says follow the law. All right. Executive branch, follow the law. Okay. And then he tells all of these agencies here, hey, you need to promote safe gun storage of firearms. So you know what this means? Because he says right here, where is it? The Secretary of Defense. Guess what now? Now we're going to have more safety briefings about safe storage of gun firearms. If you're a veteran, if you're in the military, be prepared for every Friday. In addition to don't drink, don't do drugs, don't have unsafe sex, wrap that rascal. Now you're going to make sure you store your guns properly. That's what that's going to be. So this does nothing either. Absolutely nothing. It's just to promote safe storage of firearms, whatever that means. Okay. That's not a mandate or anything like that. And then of course gives all these people to undertake efforts to encourage effective use of red flag laws. So in other words, find ways to use existing red flag laws where they exist. In other words, follow the law. He's telling these people to not only follow the law, but find a way to really follow the law. Okay. Because we need to make these extreme risk protections effective. And by effective he means we need to disarm as many people as possible. So again, this is nothing because it's telling these things, follow the law. Next, and then also these agencies again develop a proposal. And this one, I agree with this one. This is the only thing that would probably help at all, because he's telling them by September 15th of this year, how can the federal government better support mental health and other needs of survivors of gun violence? Now, here's the problem that I do have with this. Why just gun violence? Gun violence isn't the majority of violence that most people suffer in their lives. People recover from beatings, beat downs, getting hit and run over, um, belts, knuckles, all that kind of stuff. But he wants to only focus on. So if you're a victim of any other kind of violence, bat violence, wrench violence, metal hammer, whatever, you're screwed because the president only cares about helping you with your mental health if you've survived so-called gun violence. That's it. Never mind that in most cases, if you're shot by a bullet, of course, depending on where you're shot, obviously, all you've got to really deal with is that little hole that's in your muscle. Okay. And I'm talking about survivors, of course. Whereas if you're beaten with a baseball bat or, knuckles and all that kind of stuff, or a knife, the wounds are much more visceral. They're going to be much more obvious. Instead of having just a little, scar, now you're going to have giant slash mark scars or broken bones and things like that. So it's really stupid. This makes absolutely no sense. But again, it really does nothing. It just says, hey, find ways to help victims. Okay. Here's the other thing. Develop and implement principles to further firearm and public safety practices through the Department of Defense's acquisitions of firearms. So all this is saying is that when the Department of Defense is purchasing firearms, that I don't understand really why it matters, unless this is talking about the CMP, where you can buy old military weapons from the CMP, the Civilian Marksmanship Program. I don't know if that's what he's talking about, to further firearm safety and public safety practices. But other than that, why, unless, I don't know, the Department of Defense's acquisition of firearms, that's the military. The military has plenty of firearm and public safety practice rules that they go by. All right. And then 100 days, this is talking about making sure that federal agencies do what they're supposed to be doing already, which is inputting ballistic information, bullet information taken from crime scenes into this NIBIN, the National Integrated Ballistics Information Network. So the NIBIN just collects, if they need to run a ballistics, they can figure out what firearm it goes to. But again, this is already supposed to be getting done. It's already out there. So this does nothing. It does absolutely nothing. Next, work to reduce the loss or theft of firearms during shipment to FFLs. Okay, well, fix, obviously, maybe manage. I don't think that this is a big issue because guns, when they're shipped through FFLs, are highly tracked, very heavily tracked, to the point where where they are at any minute of the day. Okay. So by engaging with carriers and shippers. Now, here's my problem with this. My concern here is that is the federal government going to start requesting specific information from shippers about where these guns are coming from and where these guns are going to, as well as the make, model, and serial number of those guns, and then start a registry. This is a possibility here. If that's what they decide that this means, Pete Buttigieg and the DOJ, two Mao-run organizations here, I'm a little concerned about that. Where were they on Fast and Furious? All right. The FTC is encouraged to make a public report analyzing how gun manufacturers market firearms to minors and how such manufacturers market to civilians, including the use of military imagery. So this is the funny thing. The left loves to talk about the fact that the Second Amendment is about the militia. Well, now they don't want firearms manufacturers to cater to the militia aspect of why we have gun rights. And that's not why. It's just one of the reasons why the Second Amendment was created, to protect a pre-existing right, was because that way they can join a militia and they're already armed. But they want to issue a public report analyzing how gun manufacturers market firearms to minors and how they market to the firearms to civilians, including the use of military imagery. Again, these guys are contradicting themselves. Is it about the militia or is it not about the militia? If it's about the militia, then this doesn't matter, unless, of course, they're trying to analyze the fact that we need to add more military imagery, because we need to make sure that if anybody's using, or if anybody's being marketed to, then we need to make sure that it's towards the militia. I don't know. It doesn't make any sense. And that's pretty much it. He defines a few things here. Literally, this does nothing. It does absolutely nothing. Everything you've heard in the media about how, oh, this is going to keep us safe, and oh, thank you, Joe Biden, you've done, this executive order is going to keep people safe. I defy anybody on the left, show me where in this executive order anywhere is going to make somebody safer. Show me anywhere in this where there's something new, some new policy that the government is going to engage in that is going to stop suicides, that is going to stop community violence. Where is it? It's nowhere in here. Section 2, follow the law. Section 3, government, do your job. It doesn't make any sense. That's it. This is the 3-page executive order. It's a bunch of nonsense. I wanted you to see it here first. I wanted you to read it for yourself. I like to go straight to the source. And when I'm talking about it, I can show you instead of just saying, hey guys, this is what it, oh my gosh, be aware. Because this is what's driving me nuts about the 2A community, especially on YouTube. There's a lot of fear mongering. I don't do this for clicks. I don't do this to make money. I just want to bring you the truth. Now, I told you about the things that I was concerned about in this video, but in the grand scheme of things, this is nothing. This is Biden trying to look like he's doing something when he's never done anything at all. So that's it. That's the presidential document. This is the Reducing Gun Violence and Making Our Communities Safer executive order. I don't know how an executive order makes a community safer, because it's not the federal government's job to micromanage my community, your community, or anyone's community at all. That's just not what it is. So I hope you guys enjoyed that and got a little bit out of it. And I'm going to let you go. I've got another video that is uploading right now that will be from my speech today at the Bell County Commissioner's Court. Once again, the communist member of our Commissioner's Court here in Bell County have put forth an agenda item to demolish, that's the word he used, demolish a Confederate veteran statue. And I thought I'd go in there and educate them a little bit. And you should see that video coming up here probably within the hour. Until then, you guys take care, be safe, and be free.